Mindful communication is the way that we can bring mindfulness into our everyday. And the premise is very simple. We stay connected, connected to the body, connected to the heart, and connected to what's going on externally. It's a beautiful opportunity to be able to practice. So communication is a really powerful tool that we have, or a powerful strategy that basically allows us to make a bridge between what's happening inside for us and connect that to what's happening outside, which oftentimes is within the context of a relationship. And how we frame things, or if we share something, can have a wild difference depending on what our intention is, what our awareness is around impact of what we say, and also just the timing alone of when we say something. Communication can be a way to bring people together around shared values, and communication can be a weapon, because oftentimes the things that we say lead to an emotional response in who's receiving it. And emotions oftentimes catalyze actions. And so there's an ethical responsibility that comes around communication. How do we use our speech? How do we listen? What's the intention around what we're doing? Because if we're not careful, or if we're not conscious, if we're not intentional, it could lead to wildly different results. And so the first part really around the ethics of communication is understanding what's our patterning. We've started talking about that already. There's a lot of strategies, there's a lot of different needs that communication meets. Communication could be a way of getting attention. Communication could be a way for us meeting our need to be seen, heard, valued, understood. And so with mindful communication, a practice that can be really, really helpful in orienting the communication in the direction that we want is being clear on what's the intention. What's motivating me to speak in this moment? Am I speaking because I'm nervous and I want to fill the space? Am I speaking because I want to be important and valued? Am I speaking because nobody else is and I'm impatient and I want a decision or a particular outcome? All of these are places for investigation. The other thing that's come up a little bit in the reports is, when I'm in communication, is there consent? Oftentimes when we hear people talk about their problems, it's quite natural that we want to give our opinion or we want to advise. Is that what the other has engaged in communication with us for? Are they wanting to hear our advice? Or are they just wanting to be able to express themselves and get empathy for a situation that happened to them, where they feel alone and they want to be held and they want to be heard and understood? When we're in dialogue, am I more the speaker or am I the listener? Do I steer the conversation always back to me? Or do I allow the center of gravity to sit with the other until I sense there is a completion and what they were wanting to experience before I bring it back to me? Or are we just meandering? Are we taking turns where we offer small segments of information, watch for the impact, give space and time for the other to digest, so that when they return that response, it's a genuine gift that's unpressured, that doesn't have conditions around it? Are we co-creating an experience together? Or are we playing tug of war of who gets the microphone? Can you actually notice the impact of your words? How is the other person responding? What's their facial expression? How does their body change in response to what you say? And how do you show receptivity to another? How do you listen? Do you reflect back? Do you hold silence? Do you track with your eyes? All of these forms might be nonverbal, but assure the other person that they're not alone in the experience that we have together. So these are all components of mindful communication, is really bringing attention to what's happening in the moment. And so a couple of things that I like to think about around communication is I like the acronym for WAIT, because oftentimes it seems like it's a battle to get a word in, or there's a competition between two people. And what would happen if I were to actually stop and check in with myself and ask myself the question, why am I talking in this moment? And check in while I'm talking, is what I'm saying true? Am I exaggerating? Am I omitting? Is it helpful? Was it even asked for? Was it necessary? Is it the right time? And is it kind? And I can share this presentation with you afterwards, so don't feel like you have to take notes, but these are all components in where we can bring more mindfulness around communication. Presence is the foundation for us to have effective communication. And what I mean by effective communication is, I mean an interaction where there is connection. And so I love this picture, because just looking at this picture over here, you can see that neither person is really present. And so being present offers us a lot of information about what's actually happening, right? What's happening within us and what's happening for the other person. And is there a shared reality? And if there isn't, it allows us to self-correct by asking for clarification, maybe self-correct by just pausing and seeing if the other person has something that they want to reflect back. And this is particularly important once we start getting into more reactive types of conversations around maybe exposing something that's vulnerable, or if I'm in conflict, is that being present allows me to stay grounded, so that whatever is happening in that moment, I am responding versus reacting, meaning that whatever I am doing is conscious, is intentional, is within the framework of my ethics, versus it being automated, involuntary, something that I only notice in hindsight. So last week we did a guided meditation to check in with ourselves about what could be an anchor or a reference point that can help us stay connected to ourselves when we're in conversation. And I want you to do this for you right now. Okay? Even as you're listening, what is a sensation that is obvious to you right now in your body? And see if it's pain, see if you could choose something else that's neutral. So as I'm standing, to me, it's the soles of my feet because I can really feel the weight of my body standing over my feet. And as I'm speaking with you, I'm able to stay connected to that sensation, even as I'm presenting this material. So I want you to find your place. And this place might change depending on who you're with or what the circumstances is. But getting in the habit, even as you're listening, to find a place where a part of your attention is resting, keeping you grounded. So we played an exercise on Tuesday of allowing the pair to be in dialogue, and then I would interrupt you and we would stop and we would come back into the body. That doesn't always happen in real life, right? Usually we launch into a conversation and before we know it, it's already taken us somewhere that we had no idea it was going to go. But for the practice group for today, I think what I want to experiment with is a couple of other techniques that you can do that will allow you to stay grounded. And just as kind of a background as to why it's important for us to stay grounded, we experienced this last Tuesday, which is oftentimes we become very identified with the content of what we're saying. And we get lost in the content. And it's very important that that content is heard and it's understood, and we can become defensive about that. We might want to prove something. So staying grounded helps us shift the attention from the content to what the intention was for speaking in the first place. And perhaps my intention was that I wanted connection, or I wanted to be understood, versus the content might be a strategy to get there, but it's not the only strategy that's available. So another aspect of staying grounded is not just being connected to the body, but it's really opening things up so that we're not identified with what's happening. And we can go back into the witnessing mode that we find ourselves in oftentimes when we're meditating, meaning that we're letting the conversation go where it wants to go without trying to maneuver or have an agenda about how it needs to go. We're responding in real time what's emerging for the other person, and we're responding appropriately. And in order for that to happen, there needs to be safety. In order for the other to be able to authentically share, there needs to be space. So a couple of techniques that I want to play with today is I want to play with slowing down. One of the advantages of slowing down is it really allows us to stay connected to the body. It also allows the other to receive the information in a way that it's digestible. So I want us to practice with slowing down. I also want us to practice with pausing. There's something that is pretty impactful about pauses. It allows the other to reground as well as yourself. And it gives a chance for the other to know what's happening in response to what was just given. Pausing lets us track our impact. So I'm going to pull us out of the slideshow because I feel that was a big enough chunk of information. And let's go into a practice group.